There are colorful, hardy, and extremely vibrant corals that don't require thousands of dollars in lighting on your reef aquarium to look their best. They actually thrive in low par environments, so the inexpensive lighting can definitely get the job done. But make no mistake, there are some absolute stunners in this list, and today we're going to cover 8 awesome LPS corals that thrive in these low light conditions. We're going to start with some beginner friendly corals and actually go all the way up to an absolute showpiece coral that doesn't need a lot of light. And I'm going to give you a pro tip at the end of the video to make sure that you have the best experience when you put some of these corals in your tank. So be sure to stick around for that. The first one on the list is going to be the Duncan coral. Now this is a very beginner friendly coral. They're not very hard to keep, and the tentacles and everything, the motion that they have in the water is absolutely mesmerizing. These things look awesome. They come in a green to like a bluish green, sometimes maybe even a purple color. And the beautiful thing about these is they prefer a 50 to about 150 par environment. And it's pretty much going to be the same story for every coral on this list. Duncans are pretty easy to keep as well. They like to be spot fed with some meaty foods like brine or mysis shrimp, and they grow in a branching style of skeleton, which makes them look super awesome in just about any reef aquarium. Coming in at number 2 is going to be the candy cane coral, or some people call them the trumpet coral, and these guys thrive in even less par than Duncans, anywhere from about 40 to upwards of about 75 par. You really don't have to have a special light to keep this coral. These also have a really striking looking sort of branching bush type growth, with the main coloration of the coral being a polyp on the end of the branch. That's why we call them LPS. They're large polyp stony corals. That's what that means. These guys can tolerate a large range of parameter differences within your tank, and they appreciate low to moderate flow and have pretty cool looking feeders that are going to come out at night when the lights are off, and then they'll puff up during the day when the lights are back on. Super awesome looking coral. Some even come in neon green colorations, but there are a lot of other colors that you can choose from as well, and they love this low par environment. Oh, and hey, I'd like to give a special shout out to the 3 new channel members that we have. You guys are absolutely awesome, and thank you so much for supporting monthly in that way. I really do appreciate it, and it has allowed me to do this full time now. That's awesome. Number 3 on the list are the Favia, or the favites coral, sometimes called open or even closed brain corals. These dudes have been a staple in reef keeping for years, and they look absolutely amazing in low par environments. They really don't like super bright lighting. Anywhere from about 50 to 100 par is going to be plenty for these guys. But you do need to be careful with this one. They have sweeper tentacles that can come out and sting other corals, so it's best to keep them situated a little bit further away from the other ones. Make sure your placement is good and they have enough room to expand. About 6 inches or so around this coral is going to be just fine. So if you want to put them on a rock on their own little island, keep them out away from the other ones in a corner of the tank, they're going to do great in that area. Next up on the list, and this one is probably going to surprise a lot of people, are the Micromusa lordhowensis. Incorrectly, or not so much incorrectly, but a few years ago, these were reclassified as Micromusa lords. They are no longer classified under the acans, but they still get called acans by pretty much everybody. These love low par environments, and when I say low, I mean 25 to 50 par. There's even a lot of people who have experienced these corals coloring up and completely changing their coloration if you put them down in a 25 to 50 par environment. They hate light. They don't want to be exposed to super bright lights. And I would even probably say that a lot of people who have problems with Micromusa lords staying closed all the time and not growing, they're probably blasting them with too much par, and it's suppressing the coral because it's not happy. Put these guys down all the way near the sand bed, right at the edge of the rocks, especially near a shaded area or an overhung area in your aquarium, and these things will absolutely explode for you. And their colors can sometimes change just within 24 or 48 hours of putting them in the tank. Much like some of the others on this list, these guys do benefit from occasional feedings of meaty foods like mysis and brine and little mussel pieces and things like that. And they like a low to medium flow. They don't want to get blasted with flow either, but they do want enough that it keeps fresh food particles flowing around that coral. Do these things, and these guys are going to go nuts. Next up on the list are the Blastomusa corals, and just like the Micromusa lords, these guys want almost no light at all, really. 25 to 50 par is all you need to have them under. And this is another one that is in the same situation where if you blast them with too much light, they're going to lose a lot or all of their coloration and just bleach out and become very pale brown or even white. Keeping these down in a 25 to 50 par environment, their colors are going to explode. They're going to absolutely just start to go nuts. And one way you can tell with the Blastomusa specifically, if they're getting too much light, is sometimes they will bubble like you see on mushrooms and stuff that are bouncing and things like that. The tentacles on the Blastomusa will have a bubble, like a bubble-tipped anemone. If you see that, it's a good indicator that they're getting too much par and you need to move them down or move them under a shaded area or something like that. Now, these guys are super friendly. They're beginner friendly. They don't have to be spot fed, but they do like it on occasion, and they're really, really easy to keep. Mount them to your rocks. They're going to grow in a big cluster of these things, and in that low par environment, their color is going to get super saturated and vivid, and they're just going to look amazing. The next three corals on the list are a little bit more of an intermediate sort of a care requirement for these corals. They're not exactly what I would call beginner friendly, but they're not that hard to keep either, save for one of them. And we'll talk about that one in just a second. But before we get there, if you're surprised that some of these corals can tolerate or even prefer to be in these environments of this low par like we're talking about, subscribe to the channel, because you never know when I'm going to drop a video like this that tells you something you didn't know about before. Number 6 are going to be the Chalice corals, and much like the Favias, you're going to want to have these guys a little bit separated away from the other ones. They're going to expand out some feeder tentacles, and they can sting the other corals around them. Now, these like anywhere from 100 to upwards of about 175, maybe 200 par, but I really wouldn't push it that high. And they're going to grow in a plating, sort of a domed type of structure. And these are one of the few corals that you're actually going to see a huge difference in the way the coral grows depending on the flow patterns that you have in your aquarium. If you take a look at my Hollywood Stunner Chalice here, this guy has this high wall on one side because the flow was coming across the top of the tank, rolling down the side, and then hitting this coral directly on this side. And it was a direct laminar flow that was in this pattern for several months. And as this coral began to grow, that flow pattern pushed this wall upwards on this coral. The other side is laying down flat because there was no alternating flow pushing on that side to affect the growth. And that's why it looks the way that it does. Now, much like all of the corals on this list, if you set your lights to more of a UV and blue spectrum, almost everything I've mentioned are all going to fluoresce in bright neon colors, especially the chalices. But keep in mind that they do prefer that sort of low to medium end on the par spectrum. Number 7 are the Scolamia corals, and these you definitely want to be careful with and know what you're talking about when you keep these guys. These are a single polyp that is just going to grow and expand and get a little bigger over time, and they come in some absolutely ridiculous colorations, but they prefer anywhere from 50 to about 150 par. So keeping these guys down on the sand bed near a shaded area for some rock overhang or something like that, but still in right on that edge of the direct light is going to be a great place for these. You need to be sure that you're not mixing the different kinds though, between Indo and Australian. They're not going to like being next to each other, and they do have some pretty serious stings when they get into battle with other corals. So generally people stick to one type, and they keep them in a little Scolamia garden somewhere in the corner of the aquarium so nothing else gets messed with. Now, these guys are actually pretty slow growing. They don't really do much very fast at all. But when you have the colors of your lighting and the amino acids and the elements in your tank are all where they should be, the color that you're going to get from these Scolamia corals is second to none. They are absolutely probably one of the most vivid corals that you could put in your aquarium. Now, before I tell you the last one, which I consider to be a true showpiece coral, if you can get yourself a hold of a good one, I'm going to drop the pro tip in right here. You're going to want to acclimate these corals to the lights in your aquarium slowly. You're going to want to start them all the way down at the bottom of the aquarium and bring them up slowly over time to the par where you think they're going to do best. It is much better to give all of these corals less light than you think they need, rather than to put them a little bit too high, give them too much par, and cause them to bleach out, just sometimes even within just a few hours. Taking that little extra step of just starting these guys lower in the tank and then bringing them up slowly to where you want them to finally be is going to almost guarantee that you have good coloration and growth the whole time that you keep them until you get them where you want them. And the final coral on today's list, one that I consider to be a showpiece coral, these are actually pretty difficult to take care of. Some people don't have too much trouble with them, and different types like the Australian ones tend to be a little easier to keep than some of the other types. And the coral that I'm talking about is the elegance coral. Now, these also are a very low par coral, low to medium, I would say, anywhere from about 100 upwards of 175. Some people have even had decent luck with these things all the way down to like 50 par. They can tolerate a wide range of par, but at the low to medium end of the spectrum. They do not want to be blasted with a lot of light. So usually people keep them down on the sand bed underneath kind of a shaded area, sort of in an overhang, let their colors just absolutely pop, and these things look amazing. But if you have a healthy aquarium and you get a big showpiece elegance and you put it in there, the growth from that coral is probably going to take a hit on your parameters. So you definitely need to have a very stable tank before you consider one of these, tracking your parameters and your water quality and your elements and all of that stuff, trace elements included with ICP testing. And this is probably the most difficult coral to keep on this list because of those reasons. So don't just run out there and get one. Make sure you're doing your research first. But if you're looking for that awesome coral to just add that little bit of something to your tank that maybe it's missing, check out an elegance coral. I think you might like them. Remember, with LPS corals, slow and steady, and for the ones on this list, low par is the key. Now, if you are like me and you're just an absolutely lazy reef keeper and you don't just want to have to deal with fancy corals all the time, check this video out on the screen right here. And here's a fun fact. That is the best performing video that I have made on this channel so far. And I'm going to catch you over there.